This episode is brought to you by the Duck's Nest Motor Lodge. Hey, road warrior dads and your wood-paneled station wagons. You don't need me to tell you that 10 hours of cross-country driving with 2 to 5 kids in your 4 back seats is the recipe for putting the nuke in nuclear family. You need to stop. You need to rest. And you can't spend a lot of money doing it. What's that light up ahead? The Duck's Nest Motor Lodge. You can sleep safe at Duck's Nest Motor Lodge, where the carpet is guaranteed fire protected by 10 years of cigarette ash, 2 UHF channels, and that's right, magic fingers to help you drift off to dreamland in relaxing bliss. And every room at the Duck's Nest Motor Lodge has 5-foot ceilings. Cozy. Warning, the pool is still under repair. Be sure to say hello to our longtime resident Mitzi, but keep it down because she works nights. And thank you, Duck's Nest Motor Lodge, for sponsoring the Rereading Wolf podcast. This episode is brought to you by the support of generous listeners just like you. You can learn how to be one of them at patreon.com/rereadingwolf. And thank you, listener patrons, for supporting the Rereading Wolf podcast.
Warning. The following discussion is deliberately riddled with spoilers and unhinged speculation on this 40-year-old book, Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun. You can't read a Gene Wolfe story. You can only reread a Gene Wolfe story.
Welcome to Rereading Wolf. We've read these books many times, and we assume you have too, or at least plan to. Besides, we're here to understand them, and that means considering the works as a whole.
Hi, I'm James Wynn.
And I'm Craig Brewer.
Hey, Craig.
Greetings and salutations.
Well, all right. Well, we had an exciting episode last time. Everyone is very excited. A lot of people were waiting for this for a while. And
Action episode.
Yeah. So I guess we should just kind of dive in. We got a bunch of comments, actually.
Which is nice to see after a break.
Yeah, it's always good. Let's see. We got Carlos, BBMF. He says, I was waiting eagerly for this one as the encounter with the salamander struck me as an unexpected turn and deeply strange when I read the chapter. And he sees some comparisons between the gaping dragon, which is a boss in the Dark Souls 1 game. I'll have to trust you on that one.
I think I remember it. It's been a long time since I played the original Dark Souls.
Yep.
I think I do.
Anyway, he says, I love the high concepts of the series, but cannot resist perhaps simpler pleasure of reading about a creepy creature. And Wolfe has a way of making these encounters truly uncanny and manages to avoid making them silly or corny. I wonder how he does it. He says, perhaps it's an aspect of only giving partial and cryptic descriptions, leaving a lot to the mind of the reader. And this is similar to what Ligotti does in his stories, and also Lovecraft in his good moments. Yeah, he's got a lot of nameless, unnameable beings, right?
No, but he's right. What Wolfe does, interestingly enough, somehow is to make it specific but vague at the same time.
You're right, yeah.
Because he does talk about the weird flower opening, which is a very specific image, but exactly how that translates to a fire creature of a sort or a heat creature is weird. Yeah.
Yeah, and you had mentioned the connection between this and Stranger Things, and so and Wormy Worm Girl did also. Says it always made me think of a more exaggerated version of the Demogorgon. I wonder if there are people from Stranger Things who actually base their designs on this chapter.
It's entirely possible. I think that kind of creature has been in video games for a while. Like, it feels like there was some Resident Evil thing that has
it does feel very
flower.
It does feel very video gamey, right?
Yeah,
but this is before all that, so I don't know.
True.
On Patreon, William Lay notes that a salamander is also a grill or broiler used in kitchens. He also, I was talking about one of the saints from, I said Norwich, and he corrected me. It's actually Norwich. And frankly, I believe that that's probably true, but I just assumed that was his British accent. So I would kind of like calling, I don't know, Cleveland with a British accent, however that would be. I don't know.
Yeah. That's one of those where the consonants no longer fit the pronunciation. So Norwich and like Leicester, which looks like it should be Leicester or Leicester or something, but nope, right. Leicester. So yeah.
So in Facebook, Austin Beeman brings up some of the stuff we were talking about for the claw. It works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. Mm-hmm. He says, I see some similarities between the claw and a crucifix. The way in which the claw is often used is a way that Catholics use the crucifix. The crucifix is an item that only has power because of the blood of Christ, but actually doesn't have power. It's Christ that has the power. And in a timey-wimey way, a Christ figure could come across a crucifix and imagine that that was where the power resides. Incorrectly, of course. Craig, as you know, I kind of agree with that. It's a symbol, right, of the conciliator. It's drenched in the conciliator's blood. I think that Austin and I agree with the meaning of that symbology. When we were first working on talking about the first chapter of Shadow of the Torturer, I said, I think this book is a lot about just examining the idea of symbols. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. I think we probably disagree about what that means operationally, but I totally agree with Austin on this.
Yeah, I agree with the general gist of it. I think it gets complicated when we find out that there's something literal maybe about Severian's blood that actually does endow it with power somehow, which is different from what Catholics mean.
Well, and also I would, if say Jesus had picked up a crucifix and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, I would find that strange, because it's not like you ever had any stories in the Bible where Jesus tries to heal somebody and it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah.
Johann Karlstrom or Karstorm says, I wonder if the salamanders and nodules come from the same ecosystem, one centered around heat. The nodules would swarm like mosquitoes around salamanders, while salamanders would fill a somewhat similar or opposite role of green plants. Well, I mean, the salamander feels like he's feeding on matter itself. So he might be the only thing that could really take out a nodule. Although I suppose that beam would pretty quickly attract them.
Could be, and it does seem like a natural conclusion, though, since they're both these weird heat-related creatures.
Yeah, they are heat-related. They're both kind of heat-related creatures.
I totally see where the intuition comes. I don't think we get any more about it than that, right. And we don't know anything about the weird snail creature. We have no idea if that was related to heat in any way, too. But still, these two in particular could be from the same one. I do feel like that's sort of intentionally hint dropped. Whether or not there's anything we can get concrete from that, I don't think so. But I do think that the weird heat thing was Wolfe intentionally making both of them have that.
Oh, really? You think he wanted to have that kind of connection?
I think so. I mean, just from it seems like a nice kind of clue to sort of say, hey, these were from the same.
Oh,
place. Yeah. Which we haven't quite figured out yet.
Yeah. Like, whereas in a few chapters we're already going to know, so there's no reason to feed us that. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of heat, Mahler in Train said, Craig, your reference to the light of Milton's hellfire being not quite light, as well as the darkness of Hether's salamander giving off heat but no light, made me think of this passage from Joyce's A Portrait of the Artist of a Young Man. Father Arnall is standing before Catholic schoolboys during a religious retreat and delivering a sermon on hell. And he says, they lie in exterior darkness, for remember, the fire of hell gives forth no light. As at the command of God, the fire of the Babylonian furnace lost its heat, but not its light. So at the command of God, the fire of hell, while retaining the intensity of heat, burns eternally in darkness. It is a never-ending storm of darkness, dark flames and dark smoke, a burning brimstone, amid which the bodies are heaped one upon another without even a glimpse of air. Of all the plagues with which the land of the Pharaohs were smitten, one plague alone, that of darkness, was called horrible. What name then shall we give to the darkness of hell, which is to last not for 3 days alone, but for all eternity?
And that's the Babylonian furnace that lost its heat but not its light is from Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were put into the fiery furnace by King Nebuchadnezzar, but did not burn.
But I like this general thing, and he goes, he just says, and of course in Book of the New Sun, if the sun goes dark, that eternal darkness will spread over the earth. And there's a good point there, that sort of smothering kind of burning darkness. I think it's powerful, and I think I like that because it's more of it definitely feels more like doom than just sort of cold death, just sort of emptiness. This is sort of an actual fiery judgment of sorts where you're suffering and you are in punishment afterwards. I like that a lot. He also he has a different idea for the last one. So
okay, I'll go on to that. And he also says that for what it's worth, the flower imagery of the salamander brings to my mind the Avern flower. It has where Dorcas saw a face that was like the face of poison, and there is a kind of similar. There's the salamander is kind of a flower. The Avern is a flower. The Green Man is kind of a hybrid flower, and of course, flowers are all over this book.
Yep.
So Mike Farrar says on Reddit, someone should do an essay on Severian getting lost, and I'm surprised that no one...
we've done many ones, like little mini essays like that.
Yeah, I bet Mantis has probably written something categorizing the times that he gets lost. He gets lost in the salamander, and of course he gets, as I pointed out, he gets lost on the way to finding Baldanders. He gets specific directions to an inn and misses it and loses his way and wanders around. And what's really peculiar about it is that in an interview that Wolfe did just a few months after the publication of Citadel of the Autarch, they asked about his memory, and he says, is there any issues that you might have as an author with a character with perfect memory? He says, well, one thing, I mean, he can never get lost. So if I want him to get lost, I have to come up with a good reason. So, okay. So
he was having to come up with that reason many times in this,
right,
including in the first chapter, as I recall.
And so he misses the route to the duck's nest. He still he arrives at the duck nest, not at the inanimate structure of wood and stone, but its soul and beating heart, its kindly proprietor. He finds her. Yeah, I think you guys are right, and that Severian is being moved by providence or the claw or some psychic ability. And the mistress of the duck's nest earlier stood between his grim, imposing figure and Dorcas when she believed that Dorcas was in danger of him. Yeah, the coincidence of coming upon the proprietor instead was, that was pretty good. He saved her. She was able to lead him back. Why he needed leading back is still a mystery, but there you go. He also says that Craig is right. This beast is uniquely demonic and hideous. When it leans over the charred corpse of the old woman in the jacal, it pauses from pursuing Severian to burn her again, reduce her to ash. That's just evil, man. Do better, Hathor. Hathor is not going to do better. Mahler and Train had another comment. He enjoys the Hamlet Mill stuff, and well, thank you very much. I can't stop pointing it out. I really love that book, Craig. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, and
yes, you have.
Really it really helps me rationalize mythology as well. I often go through a lot of times earlier when I was younger, and I'd read, like the Greek myths. It was very hard to keep track of what had happened. It was much like probably a lot of people when they read the Book of the New Sun. They say, I think Ada Palmer pointed this out, that people, even if they've read it multiple times, have a hard time exactly detailing everything that happens in it. And it was kind of like that. Whereas, when you paste this Hamlet's Mill, things start to make sense. The most bizarre things you can say, oh yeah, now I know what they're doing. I know what's happening here. So I do like that. And he also likes your Jungian archetypes. As he points out, and something I also agree, I think Wolfe is deliberately creating myth in these in these stories.
Yeah, there would be a good book to write something about Wolfe and Jung and tarot and all that. So I'm not the one to do it, but I would definitely read it.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. Mahler in Train does one more thing, and I think this is actually kind of interesting. This is something sounds a lot like me. He says, I've always been struck by that scene in Shadow where Severian meets Valeria. He says he's looking for Triskelly. He meets Valeria. She's wearing furs when he encounters her. And he says it's like the archetypical story of a youth chasing an animal into an unknown region and the animal transforming into a queen. I think there are Irish tales like that. And he says, did I just start a Valeria is Triskelly theory? I hope so. Yeah, I think you did. And I'm mildly compelled by that. I like it.
That would be an interesting one to follow up. That would be a very interesting curiosity to search this to see how far you could take that.
Yeah. Mantis did one, comparing Valeria to two different characters in Great Expectations, and and that's an alternate reading that I really kind of like a lot, and I think. And the more I think about it, I'll bet whatever it means, I think Wolfe was conscious of it. So, yeah, I like that. Let's see. Then we have a new listener, Colchester, or at least that's the first time I think he's made a comment. Maybe I'm wrong. He says, I recently started, rereading Wolfe. And so I discovered this podcast. He says, what a treasure. Well, thank you. It means a lot to me too. I never participated, but I remember poring over bits of the Earth List archives in my earliest internet days. So that was all credentials you needed. But when I came up to the episode where Craig mentions Dark Souls, he says, I'm playing Elden Ring. I felt like it was among my people.
I feel bad now that I said I forgot the Dark Souls.
Yeah, you've really lost you some cred there. But I came up with certain anticipatory nostalgia seeing the show started in 2019, and I wasn't aware of it then. To then discover you're still going strong 7 years in. That is, considering the way we've done it, that is the most amazing thing. That even though we've gone dark many times.
I was going to say, we're still going. Whether or not we're going strong is something we're trying to get back to.
We've always been going in our hearts. In those, in the longest periods of drought, we've talked about it. We continue to reach out. We still record it all the time. So yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And no, it's great how people find this. And since it is all about, rereading, whenever you are rereading, you can jump right on in and do it that way. So hopefully it'll stay that way and more people will find it as time goes on. It's not exactly topical, because it's not, it's time-based, but it's time-based on your own start. So the only people who really suffer then are the ones who are waiting for the next episodes to come out, who are all caught up.
Colchester also commented on the chapter 19 of Shadow episode. And he says, I hope it's not too late to comment here. I guess it never is. That's Reddit. But now's when I'm listening to the episode. So you commented on the phrase master of powers being a strange way to refer to the Christ-like figure of the conciliator. But it seems to me that the English rendition of the Greek that is normally rendered into English as Lord of Hosts, he basically instead of hosts, the word is Kyrios, which is Lord, ton, dynamion, which I guess it could be read as kind of like power, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, which is pretty good. He says it's really quite a familiar biblical term, only translated in an unusual way. But unlike the translation of Terminus Est or the mottos in the Atrium of Time, it's still quite literally. That's pretty good. I actually, that makes a lot of sense. I will never read that passage from Agia the same way again. A Neuromancer has this really long one in Reddit, and it's in the it's within the episode conversation. So if you just go and look for episode 3-9, and you'll find this. But this is he calls it the role of a theta, and he's reposting it here, I think. And he and
it's a good long essay, really, about a theta's role in the hierogrammatic system, and sort of all the evidence of who she is or what she is. So very, very comprehensive, and based around her own quotes or quotes that Wolfe says about her. So definitely worth your time to read.
Yeah, and also, he points out something I don't think I never looked up. It is in astrology the planet or point in the sky that dominates at a man's birth and influences his whole life. So I still wonder what a theta means, what the larva does, how she operates, and what's going on there in chapter 20 of of Earth and the New Sun. But he that meaning that of a planet that it dominates your birth. It's overseeing at your birth. So I think Lexicon Earthus cites these connections. But I've never looked it up. So, but that was really interesting to me. Anyway, yeah, check it out. We can't go through it all here, but it's really, really good. On X, Ending Bigly is re-listening to the show, and so he mentions from the Jonas chapter in the part 1 episodes. He says, mention is made of many times at the scaffold. I have recalled Vodalus at the graveside and pretended that I would be striking for him. And we noted at the time that you haven't really been at the scaffold very many times since before you stopped being a follower of Vodalus, right? That seemed to be kind of a very strange thing. And he says, well, maybe he means it in the opposite way. Instead of I'm striking in his honor, I'm striking for him. I'd like to stick this, cut his head off with this sword. And also, he says, I was rereading Claw when I got to the notchules, and I couldn't remember if you guys discussed how fortuitous it was that the notchules pushed Severian and Jonas so far, and that they would be in a perfect position to see, Jolenta and the whole crew. And yeah, I'm obsessed with that. So there you go. Okay, Craig, we got a review on Apple Podcasts.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so it says, best Book of the New Sun podcast. That is a tall order, and I will accept it, even though I'm not sure it's true. But I'm on my 4th read of the Book of the New Sun and was recommended this podcast by the Gene Wolfe subreddit. It's exactly what I wanted. They break down the books virtually sentence by sentence and explore different interpretations and fan theories. I've gained an even greater appreciation for my favorite series thanks to this podcast. A note for the hosts. Keep up the wild speculations. The crazier the theories, the better. I guarantee, Craig, I will not let him down. So that's Kyle M88. And thank you very much. It means a lot. Well, Craig, we're going to go back to the duck's nest now. Finally, Severian is making his way back to the hotel. And we've been here before where he describes what happened at the party, but finally we're going to wrap it up and get the conversation between him and Dorcas about their relationship.
Chapter 10, Lead.
The pronunciation, Craig, I don't think it would be obvious to a first-time reader. Like maybe it could be lead, like a clue. And I guess it is a clue. Or of sorts, but I think lead is what we're looking for, right? This chapter follows directly on from the previous chapter and the death of the salamander. Severian looks through the hole in the floor where the salamander fell. He says, there was a moment when I thought I would fall into the gaping hole in the center of one of the little room before I could regain Terminus S and carry the mistress of Duck's Nest to safety. And another moment when I was certain everything was going to fall in the trembling structure of the room itself and us together. And anyway,
so kind of nice little moment that the chapter begins sort of on the line between life and death.
Yeah.
Which is like literally and sort of like an abyss that you could fall into. And and we're going to see that's really what Dorcas is going to be talking about here pretty soon.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, they get to the street outside of the Hakao, and there's no people on the street. The regular folk have run away, and the soldiers have all chased the falling salamander down below. So probably, no one is going to go looking for Severian tonight. But in the morning, things will be different. So Severian supports the woman and asks her, questions about who knows what, but he doesn't get anything useful. And she leads them back to the end where Dorcas is sleeping. And Severian, he collects a bottle of wine and glass, and he goes to her room. And there's a little table there, just big enough to set the wine glass and the bottle on it. This reminds me of Thekla's cell. That is also just big enough for a little table and a bed.
Yep. And just to kind of push the symbolism way too far, she starts off the chapter asleep or unconscious, which is, we can kind of imagine how Severian thought of her first. Then he was there, and he does have this bottle of wine, sort of like there is some kind of, we've already seen water change into wine at some point, but he does have the wine with him. And while he's sitting there drinking that, which is, again, a kind of symbol of, things changing from water to wine or whatever, then that's when she
and wine.
Up. Yep.
Right. Yeah.
And he said in fact, maybe in the sense, actually, I didn't think about that. But, he even says, whatever the wine was, it seemed strong in my mouth and yet no more than water after I had swallowed it. So it's sort of like a reverse transubstantiation. That he's describing.
Yeah, as Severian tries to identify the type, maybe a sommelier is listening. He only knows that it seems strong, like you say, strong in his mouth, and then water later. After he knocks out a half bottle, he says, "I felt no more effect on it than if I had swallowed so much sherbet."
Sherbet. I like sherbet.
Yeah, it's a good word to say. I haven't heard that in a while.
Also, very much anticlimax after we've had water and wine. And
right,
and all that.
Yeah, right. And at that point, Dorcas does wake up, you say, and she first jumps up, seeing Severian, and then she lays back down on the pillow. I should have known it was you. I don't know.
Yeah, but there's also very much like her, like she's brought back and then sort of let down again, and she lies back. So, again, I'm reading way too much into all this stuff, I know, but it still is very cool how so much of the stuff at the beginning of this chapter kind of mirrors their experience.
Yeah, the beginning of their relationship, right?
Yep.
So he apologizes for scaring her. He just came back to check on her. He doesn't tell her yet that he's leaving her or that he's lost his job. I suppose he's working up the courage to being told, "I told you so," right?
Yeah. Also, I mean, he does know she's been sick, and he's been through a crazy experience, right?
Yeah,
he
just quite a night
himself. Yep. But he also knows that Dorcas is going through something, and now he's going to have to deal with that, and he's got to eventually deal with telling her that he's got to be on the run, and he doesn't know how that's all going to affect her. So he's kind of with Dorcas. I feel like when this starts, he's in a place where he doesn't really know how she's going to react to anything that has happened to him.
Right. Exactly.
He's got a lot he's on edge here.
Yeah, he's got a lot to unpack and a lot he doesn't want to unpack, right? He's not going to tell everything he's done tonight. So Dorcas notes that she always seems to wake up with him bending over her. Ha ha ha. And certainly that's how it was early that day. And she closes her eyes and says, "You walk so very quietly in those thick-soled boots of yours. Do you know that? It's one reason people are afraid of you." It's creepy, like a cat or Batman.
And he even immediately goes, and the next thing he asks, he says, "You once told me I was like a vampire," which if we're thinking about like, creeping over or like looming figures over sleeping women. Yeah, totally a vampire. This was before Paranormal Activity and the weird, videos of people just staring at their wives for hours because they're possessed or whatever. But I think that whole, there's something about the undead that she's invoking, and he goes right to it. He's like, you said that already once.
Yeah, that was in Shadow of the Torturer right after the play. And maybe the purpose of that is just to remind readers at this point that happened, right?
Yep. And I think also it's sort of it shows that she is thinking about undead things. Right. Like that is what she's preoccupied with and Severian kind of intentionally or not catches on to that, brings up the vampire, but she's totally talking about the undead, which is what she's kind of figuring out she is in a certain
right. And Severian's trying to cheer her up, right? He's trying to make her laugh or something. But Dorcas is not having it. She says, "You want me to laugh again, don't you? But I'm afraid I can't ever laugh anymore." I remember that Severian still figures this is all about himself. So he changes the subject. "Oh, would you like some wine? It was free. It's not as bad as I expected." And it's not as bad as I expected. I don't know how bad. It doesn't sound very good. But she says, "To cheer me? No." And then she offers some advice that you'll see quoted a lot on the internet. She says, "One ought to drink, I think, when one is cheerful already. Otherwise, nothing but more sorrow is poured into the cup."
And that's probably true. That's probably just fairly true. And it's something that, I think she's thinking about. Also, this does give him a chance because his next line is, he says, "At least have a swallow." The hostess here says, "You've been ill and haven't eaten all day." And that, again, Severian is sort of bumping into things, bringing up things, I think, unconsciously that are really going on with Dorcas. So this allows her to have the perfect segue into, taking things in and spewing things up. So she's like, "No, I'm not going to swallow anything." Quite the opposite has been happening all day long.
Yeah. When I read this, it reminded me of another very different consideration about drinking from the protagonist Aurorel in C.S. Lewis's Till We Have Faces. She basically says, people say that you should drink to feel better, but really you just feel more of everything. If you feel bad, you're just going to feel more. You're going to feel like your sorrows are just great things, tremendous. So, maybe I think that's really a totally different sentiment, but just another perspective on drinking to feel better. So Severian urges to at least have a swallow. He's been told that she hasn't eaten all day. So Severian lights a candle, and now they're sitting in near darkness all this time. Any light must be coming in, like through the windows from the street or outside the door. And now Dorcas notices that Severian is wearing his cloak. And she says that he must have scared the hostess coming in like that. But he says, no, she wasn't afraid of me. She's pouring her in. She's pouring into her cup whatever she finds in the bottle. So
she saw something much worse just now.
But she's definitely drinking tonight. So this is, like I said, this is a reference to what Dorcas was saying about drinking when you're unhappy. Dorcas says that Severian is calling the woman, the hostess, a drunk. She says, "She's been good to me. She's been very kind. Don't be so hard on her if she chooses to drink so late at night." And Severian denies he's being hard on her, but anyway, he tries to get Dorcas to eat. He'll bring up whatever food she needs, and this makes Dorcas smile.
Yeah, if anything, he knows that, she needs a drink. She's just seen some crazy stuff. So
but he says he'll bring up whatever food she needs, and she's thinking about what she's actually going through, which is that she's been upchucking lead weights all day.
Yep. I've been bringing up my own food all day. That was what she meant when she told you I'd been ill. Or did she tell you? Spewing.
I should think you could smell it yet, though the poor woman did what she could to clean up after me.
Yeah. Spewing. Yeah, I think Wolfe is kind of obsessing over this word spewing because it's kind of suggests like water again, like a fountain, but
I
it's
think
something else.
Yeah, I think that's true because it's not the most common word for throwing up, but you're right. I do like it as it's much more liquid than but in all the words they're talking about, like swallow, spew, are all ways to focus on liquid going up or down. Yeah.
And then Dorcas notices the smell of smoke and fire on Severian's clothes, and she guesses that the wick of the candle needs to be trimmed and suggests that Severian do it with Terminus Est. And that's overkill, I think, to use a giant sword to trim the wick from a camel. But it's from the Salamander, but Severian says, it's my cloak you're smelling, I think. I've been standing too near a fire.
Yeah, it's just true.
Yeah. But Severian is still traumatized by fire. She sees him and notices that the flame of the candle is making him feel uncomfortable. And Severian says, no, I said it's all right as long as I don't actually look at the flame. Dorcas says that she thinks he seems to feel the same way that she does around water. Now, people, this is unreliable narration. This is Severian's opportunity to change the subject away from fire. And he says, this afternoon, I found you sitting by the very edge of the river, right? She's supposed to be afraid of water and she's by the river. And Dorcas says, yep, and then goes silent.
He says, it was a silence that lasted so long that I was afraid she wasn't going to speak again at all, that the pathological silence, as I now was sure it had been, that had seized her then, had returned.
So finally, Severian says, I was surprised to see you by the water, given how you feel about it. I was searching for you, but I doubted at first it was you. And she says, I spewed, Severian. I told you that, didn't I? And like I said, interesting choice of words. Severian says, yeah, you told me. And she's just laying on her back, looking at the low ceiling, and I think the intended image is a body in a coffin.
Yep, I think so too. I had the feeling that there was another Severian there, the kind and even noble Severian who existed only in Dorcas's mind. All of us, I suppose, when we think we are talking most intimately to someone else, are actually addressing an image we have of the person to whom we believe we speak. But this seemed more than that. I felt that Dorcas would go on talking if I left the room.
I will not blame you people for assuming that I'm about to bring up the first Severian theory. And that's on me. It's not you. But I'm not. And I'm not. But in each volume of this novel so far, there has been a discussion about people interacting with an image of that person in their own mind rather than the person themselves. In Shadow of the Torture, it was the false Thecla who said that Thecla was not the real Thecla, not the Thecla that he thinks of. I think I understand, but I suspect the final victorious confirmation of that theory has permanently passed beyond our grasp, Craig. We should have started this thing 10 years earlier so I could talk to Wolfe about it, but I'm not going to burden you with that now. The second time was by Dorcas when Severian was reunited with her at last, and she despaired that people preferred to slap labels on folks instead of dealing with them as people. And here we are again. I could work this into a theme, but I think whatever theme I used, I would only be wedging into some other theme. And anyway, anyone else who would be doing the same, we'd all just be doing what Dorcas warned us against. And yet, this is the life we chose, Greg. Who is Dorcas actually talking to?
Yeah. And I think right here, she is in many ways talking to herself, but also I think she feels, I'd go further than that. I don't think she's just talking to herself. I think she says that ultimately part of the reason she feels like a ghost is that she exists in a world where only she can see who she thinks she really is, that nobody else can, like, she's out of place. She's out of her real time. She's, come around however many years after she actually died. So this is not her world anymore. And the people who
even if she was able to go back, as she does ultimately go back to that world, she's not gonna see the people as they were when they left. She's gonna, see her son as an older man, and see her husband, if she does, as a very old man now. So in a sense, she's talking about something that is not just a sort of psychological reality, but I think also is very, very literally real in a certain sense. And that Wolfe is going to point out is actually part of her tragedy here, in a little bit. Because as I've sort of told you offline a little bit, but I think there's what's going to be ultimately weird about this chapter is that it sets us up to see Wolfe playing with the idea of resurrection as really a tragic thing. And I think so often we assume that resurrection is supposed to be a good thing, but this is kind of like the negative image that we're going to get. And
yes,
Wolfe
the dark
is
side,
making it complicated. That, what if there's bad resurrection? Like, it's not all just good. And what does that do to the claw then? Does the claw always do good things, or can it maybe be misguided in certain senses? That's something that, like, did it do something ultimately bad here by bringing her back? And I think this is, in this chapter, ultimately that's kind of where they come down, and that should change a lot of things that we might think about the claw and about what his power is supposed to be doing. Also, it brings a whole darker sense to what the new sun would be. If the new sun is going to bring things back to life, is that a good thing? Or
it's very self-conscious about Severian's mission, right?
Yeah. But so I think this whole point here about, we talk to the image we have of people rather than the real person themselves. That's very much part of something Wolfe deals with all the time, that, we have our perspectives and we live in our perspectives of the world around us rather than necessarily easily knowing what's true. And I think that's definitely going on here. It's also literalized in Dorcas's sense, because she is out of place and feels out of place. And that even if somebody was trying to know her, they can't. Like, even here, it's still a question sort of how much Severian ultimately agrees with her that she's, kind of out of place, and that nobody can see who she really is now because of what happens. So, anyway, but so I agree. That's what's going on.
All right, so let's get out of Severian's head and back to the conversation. Dorcas says, "Do you know what I coughed up, Severian?" Severian says, "No, water." And she says, "Sling stones." That is lead bullets that you could use for slings. And by the way, remember that at the beginning of the Claw of the Conciliator, there was a special division of slingers, the Erentari, which seems to be actually Wolfe's error, or the error of whatever source he was using, the Ferentari. Wolfe seems to have read it wrong, I think. Anyway, the division was a singing song with a shooting star at the end of every verse. "When I was a lad, my mother said, 'You dry your tears and go to bed. I know my son will travel far, born beneath a shooting star.'" Right? So according to Wolfe in his Hands and Feet essay in Castle the Otter, these slingers fire pyrotechnic missiles, and that the shooting star of their and that is the shooting star of their song. And Wolfe explains that the song was intended as a kind of foreshadowing, because Severian's star, the new sun, is already on its way. So Dorcas, dead Dorcas, who is now alive, has prefigured the new sun as the opposite of a black hole, a white fountain, and now as a star, which is hurtling towards Earth and will arrive only in about 50 years from now. So Severian thinks she's speaking metaphorically when she says, bullets, slinger bullets. And he just says, "Well, that must have been very unpleasant."
Her head rolled on the pillow again, and now I could see her blue eyes with their wide pupils. In their emptiness, they might have been two little ghosts, which, again, is something she's going to bring up again. "Sling stones, Severian, my darling, heavy little slugs of metal, each about as big around as a nut and not quite so long as my thumb, and stamped with the word strike.
They came rattling out of my throat into the bucket, and I reached down, put my hand down into the filth that came up with them, and pulled them up to see. The woman who owns this inn came and took the bucket away, but I had wiped them off and saved them. There are 2, and they're in the drawer of that table now. She brought it to put my dinner on. Do you want to see them? Open it.
So Severian's really confused now. He doesn't doubt that she's telling the truth, or at least believes she's telling the truth. And he doesn't look at them. He says, do you think someone's trying to poison you? And she says, no, look at them. But he won't look at them. He says, I trust you. You say there's sling stones in the table. I'm sure they're there.
Yep. Now, one thing I should have checked and remember, did they talk about stuffing the people with lead way back in the
they did.
Okay.
You know what? Before we say that, I think they did.
Let's
confirm it. It's in the Dorcas chapter, actually, and I think it was Asia who mentions it.
So, and we've talked before about whether or not you know on a first read that Dorcas is the old man's wife, who, there is the Cass, he calls her Cass, and then we get Dorcas, and there's enough there to sort of point to it that's there. But I feel like the way I remember it, you're sort of supposed to think that, she was one of those bodies that was come up.
Right.
So this chapter is not so much a reveal of that. It's more specifically about her realization that that's what happened.
Right. Although I think I talked to a lot of people online who say, this was a big reveal for me. Was a big surprise.
I totally see that, and I think that could be it. I'm just kind of thinking as I read it and thinking about how Wolfe put things together. I feel like what's more important here is not the realization of that fact, but specifically Dorcas realizing it in a way she can't avoid anymore.
Right.
Like she can't just say she doesn't remember that. In a lot of ways, this stuff is not new information that Wolfe is giving us. Instead, it's the character really knowing it for the first time. And so it's kind of her finding out some truth about herself when we write this up. So this is more, it also makes you think, Severian kind of knows that too, because he was fully awake and conscious when everybody was talking about it that back then. It wasn't something that he was totally clueless about making a possible connection for. It's now just that he's going to have to face up to that and figure out sort of what he thinks it means too. And I think ultimately he's not quite ready for that. But Dorcas does want to. Anyway,
everyone else was fooled too. I mean, no one seems to have noticed her crawl out of the water, right? She's just there suddenly. Yep. And Severian has seen enough that he could have put 2 and 2 together, but he just didn't.
Yeah,
because he's so often dense.
Or I wonder though if he's dense because he doesn't.
Well, maybe he doesn't want something. It could be like looking at the candle, like looking at the flame of the candle. It could just be something he didn't want to look too closely at.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of maybe what's going on here because he's still trying to convince her through all of this conversation that no, look at how other people look at you. You're very much alive.
You're fine.
He's trying to admit that, and I think maybe not just because he doesn't. I mean, he certainly doesn't know she's his grandmother at this point. It's not the incest thing at all. I don't think.
It's all going to get much worse, Severian.
But it's more that he doesn't know. He doesn't know what to make of that if it is true. Like she's going to bring up the thing about the claw, and about how it can heal and maybe bring people back, and he wants to admit that, but doesn't really. Like he'll even say here in a second, I didn't even know it could do it back then, and I was buried in my boot at the time. I had no idea it was there, and et cetera, et cetera.
It was always a saber tash at the time,
or saber tash, and so he's going to try and resist this, and I think that's an important thing that I don't think people talk about much when they talk about this. Is why does Severian resist the idea that this happened? Like, why does he not want to just be like, yeah, it's a miracle, we brought you back to life? Like he doesn't go that route. He wants to kind of avoid her realization as well here. And I think that's also important about sort of what's going on with the resurrection, but we'll get to more of that later. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. They keep talking, and Dorcas says, but you don't believe I coughed them up. I don't blame you. Isn't there a story about a hunter's daughter who was blessed by a partle so that beads of jet fell from her mouth when she spoke? And then her brother's wife stole the blessing, and when she spoke, toads hopped from her lips. I remember hearing it, but I never believed it.
Okay, so a partle is an old word for a sparrow in Spanish, or a falcon. It's so old and obsolete in every language that it might not even mean sparrow or falcon or even a leopard. And pards for leopards is a word in Severian's world, so it probably doesn't mean that. Which brings us to the source of this story. It comes from the Blue Fairy book by Andrew Lang and his wife, Lenora Elena. And I don't know how to pronounce her name.
I don't
Of course, it doesn't come from them originally. It's handed down in multiple versions, but it seems to have been collected by Charles Perrault, the man who we owe our version of Cinderella. And this story is very similar to Cinderella, and both are very ancient. Cinderella goes back to Egypt, at least, and Perrault titled this story The Fairies, all to say, you'll find this story in the Blue Fairy book under Toads and Diamonds. It goes like this. A disagreeable widow had two daughters. Her oldest was just like her, bad-tempered and proud and looked like her too. So naturally, she was her mother's favorite. Her youngest is sweet and courteous and beautiful, but looks like her dead father. So naturally, the other two mistreat her because, no one likes a phony. So one day, the pretty youngest one was pulling water from the well, and an old woman asked her for a drink, and she gives it because, she's sweet. And surprise, this was a test. The old woman is a fairy, and she's just running around testing mortals for good character. So the fairy blesses the girl so that a jewel or flower falls out of her mouth whenever she talks, which sounds like a disability, but this is a wonderful thing. So the girl goes home at first abused for taking so long. And then she explains, and jewels and flowers are falling out of her mouth. So the widow, is pretty pleased, but she wants her favorite daughter to get the same blessing. So she commands her to go to the well too. And naturally, the bad sister doesn't want to go to the well and be blessed with jewels and flowers coming out of her mouth. This is stupid. If you had kids, you'd probably seen one like this. Her mother sends her off to the well. You get it. Go get it. Get to that well and get that blessing. So the girl goes to the well, and now there's a beautiful princess there. Well, this isn't who she was looking for. Big disappointment. And the obnoxious, beautiful princess asks the girl to draw some water for her to drink, but she replies rudely to the princess, as she does to everyone, and insults her. And as everyone already knows, the princess reveals she's a fairy and tells her that as punishment for her lousy attitude, whenever she speaks, a toad or a snake will fall out of her mouth. So she goes home and tries to explain what happens, and sure enough, toads and vipers fall out of her mouth. And now the widow is really upset and drives her youngest out of the house. This seems really stupid. You get rid of the daughter who's spitting jewels, and you keep the one who's spitting poisonous snakes. But, some people are just ornery. And in a very short while, she meets a prince who falls in love with her face and personality and that hoard of jewels spewing out of her mouth, and they get married. And eventually the widow can't stand to live with her eldest either, and drives her away and dies sour and miserable in the woods alone. And anyway, Severian asks, how could anyone cough up lead? And Dorcas has already figured it out.
Yeah, so she's figured that out. One thing I should say too about the fairy books, the Andrew Lang's fairy books, there are fairy books of all colors. The green fairy book, the blue fairy, I think the blue was the first one, but then there was the green fairy book and the rose.
There's the lavender.
Book.
The blue one's the easiest to find because it's always the first one that someone's ordered. So
Yep. And it's fun to bring that up just because it's very much a kind of brown book thing that they were collecting all these stories from all over the place, and a lot of the stories got messed up or corrupted from their original versions or retold or cleaned up or all kinds of things like that. But it's definitely I feel like something that the Brown Book was kind of
going for.
And Wolfe mentions the fairy books in a couple places. Like he was familiar with them enough that I know they come up in one or two interviews somewhere, but they're definitely the kind of thing he would have read, like collections of stories from all over the place. So that's just cool. So Severian just asks, how can anyone cough up lead? So Dorcas laughed, but there was no mirth in it. Easily, so very easily. Do you know what I saw today? Do you know I couldn't talk to you when you found me? And I couldn't, Severian, I swear it. I know you thought I was just angry and being stubborn, but I wasn't. I had become like a stone, wordless, because nothing seemed to matter, and I'm still not sure anything does.
And she apologizes for their fight the other night and for saying Severian isn't brave. She reminds him of how brave. Remember, this is just the night before, right? Mm-hmm. She reminds him of how brave he was when he fought Agilus, and quote, later when you would have fought with Baldanders because we thought he was going to kill Jolenta. And I got to say, Dorcas, that is putting a shine on that interaction with Baldanders that I don't think Severian deserves at all. He only went back because you did and because you shamed him for not preventing Jolenta from being beaten or even killed. Yeah.
Speaking of having an image of someone in your head, she's got one of Severian.
Yeah. So anyway, she just goes silent again and says, "Oh, Severian, I'm so tired." And this provides just the dramatic pause that Wolfe needs to let Severian start talking. He's got something to say about that fight, and he's just going to ignore for now that his girlfriend is coughing up rocks. And he doesn't sound like an apology, really, not at first. Dorcas tries to stop him. She tries to tell him, that he said this before, but he just goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So he says, I wanted to talk to you about that, about the prisoners. I want you to understand, even if you can't forgive me, it was my profession, the thing I was trained to do from boyhood. I leaned forward and took her hand. It seemed as frail as a songbird. And I could do it well. Dorcas, that's what you don't understand. Excruciation and execution are arts, and I have the feel, the gift, the blessing. This sword, all the tools we use live when they're in my hands. If I had remained at the Citadel, I might have been a master. Dorcas, are you listening? Does this mean anything to you?
So remember, it seems that Palamon and Gerlo thought that he was gifted and could be a master too. And in the novella, that was the seed of the Shadow of the Torture. Severian did become a master anyway.
Yeah, but it's the whole Dorcas thing is Severian missing the point. Like she's bringing up this one thing, and he's going back.
This is my dream. This is my dream, Dorcas. You don't understand.
Even though I think already we've talked about ways that it's not quite anymore, right? But he's
right, exactly. I was born to excruciate. I was born,
yeah. But I think it's still, he's falling back on this because it's a more comfortable thing to think about, to keep arguing about that argument they've had before, than to face what she's saying and what she's really getting at. Yeah.
And so anyway, Dorcas says, yes, I get it. I think a bit, but I'm thirsty. If you're done with that wine, why don't you pour me some? She probably thinks that if she has to hear that speech again, she's going to need more wine. So Severian gives her a quarter of a glass. He's afraid she's going to spill it. He didn't think that she could sit up, but she does. And she drains the glass and throws it out the window onto the street, and they can hear it break. She explains that she doesn't want him to drink after her. That's why she broke the glass. And Severian says, so you think you're contagious? And she laughs and says, yes, but you have it already. You caught it from your mother. Death, Severian. You never asked me what it was I saw today. Everyone is always making jokes about death. She's convinced she is death now. She's had a sense that she is since she was wandering around with Talos and Baldanders and Jolenta. And Craig, we're not really done with this. Do you want to go on and move to the next chapter?
Yep. We can do that because it's a short chapter and because we've already cut into the next chapters a little bit talking about Syriaca. But also I want to point out a couple other things about lead.
because he titles the chapter Lead. And there's a couple of things that I think are important. There's one thing that doesn't really get emphasized and or really talked about, but the idea of alchemy, of, turning lead into gold. And there is a sense in this chapter that we have something that seemed like it might have been precious, like her life, that's now, in a sense, turning back into lead. And that's kind of what's happening. Like her resurrection has been sort of reduced to this symbol of the lead stones now. And I don't know if the Wolfe was intentionally thinking of alchemy, but that's one of the first things I thought about, was that it's kind of like alchemy in reverse, which again is sort of like this take on resurrection, but we're getting here a version where resurrection doesn't lead to good things. It's not something you would want. It actually leads to this tragic situation of people being out of place and of missing their life. And so I think the important question to ask, especially as we move through some of the rest of this whole discussion here, and is ultimately like, why did Wolfe choose with Dorcas to have resurrection, which so much of this book is about? The new sun is about resurrection. It's about resurrecting the earth. It's it's a religious symbol in that sense. Why have the one character that Severian is closest to actually literally undergo resurrection and have that be the worst thing that's ever happened to her in her entire life? Like, why do that? Why would he do that? Doesn't that sort of mess up the symbolism of whatever it is that he's trying to talk about? Doesn't even, in a sense, sort of mess up the cloth, just from a sort of plot perspective? That if it does that, why is that a good thing? Because we don't think of, there are no stories in the Bible where Jesus raises someone from the dead or heals someone.
Why'd you do that?
That's worse. That just doesn't happen. So why does that happen for Severian? And I think we get a couple little hints at some answers that come up. But it's something that I think with this chapter and the next couple is incredibly important to figure out and to think about what Wolfe's doing with the sort of religious overtones, and maybe even just the straight up religious plot of the story. In other words, after you read Lead, I think you can't just sort of blindly say in this book, resurrection is always good. I just think it's not that there's a certain kind of resurrection that is good and a certain kind that is not. And we're going to get some more exploration of why this one.
Well, maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's that resurrection requires the death of something else. There's the parable of Jesus that unless a seed dies, it can't become can't produce a plant. Dorcas, in order for the earth to be reborn, the old earth has to die, and for Dorcas to have this new life with Severian, everything of her old life has to, for all intents and purposes, die. It goes into the past where it can't be retrieved.
Yeah. And I think that's right. And I think she becomes a symbol of that there has to be something that is truly lost. And so there's a sense here in which Dorcas's story is almost like saying, yes, there may be resurrection, there may be salvation, but that doesn't mean that everything happens good. It's like there must still be loss. There must still be a certain kind of tragedy. And Dorcas in many ways becomes a symbol of the thing that kind of has to be lost. So there's more to it, but I think you're absolutely right that's part of what's going on. It's also why ultimately I think that, so many people who don't like the books get mad because they're like, well, it sucks that you have to drown the whole earth in order to have it come back. Like, that just doesn't seem good. And that's kind of the point behind like Peter Wright's book too, is that obviously this is horrible because you've got all this awful stuff happening.
So he's being suckered.
Right. And I think that's misreading it. I think there's a very strong sense here that even if this is divine, it's not meaningful unless something is actually lost in the process.
Right.
So Bill, more about that though. Yeah.
Right. When Moses leads the children of Israel out of Egypt, what do they leave in their wake? A lot of dead firstborns. And
So yeah, this is a hard lesson. This is not an easy good lesson. The conciliator is not just pure goodness, I guess, because the conciliator is conciliating between things that need conciliating.
That don't go together very well. So
yeah, and they don't, and that's part of the problem. So yeah, but anyway, I just think it's super important with Dorcas to really push on that. Like, what's the cost of her resurrection? And sort of she becomes an image of that cost. So yeah. So okay. But if you remember, we did talk about parts of chapters 11 and 12 already, because we get the Syriaca story finally retold through here. Maybe it's again Severian wanting to not have to deal with what Dorcas is talking about. So he talks about Syriaca a lot. But maybe not. There's a lot of other stuff that we didn't talk about that we're gonna keep going. So lead, and now we have chapter 11, the Hand of the Past.
Okay, so I guess this title is called that because the true nature of their pasts have returned to bite them. For Dorcas,
could be. It's also maybe that the hands reach out, and that's when she's resurrected. That those hands in the past, something grabbed. Maybe I don't know. That's reading it, but yeah.
For Dorcas, it's that she died sometime in the past. For all she knows at this point, centuries in the past. And for Severian, maybe because he comes to believe the claw has been affecting his life since he got it more than he realized. And that maybe it's not a matter of pulling it out and waving it in front of the vampire's face, as he said in the very first chapter of this book. And this event was probably being foreshadowed when he wrote that. Things work of themselves or not at all. If the claw resurrects sometimes when he pulls it out and taps a body, then it can resurrect anytime, theoretically anywhere. And this recalls an event in the New Testament where a centurion sends a message to Jesus asking him to come heal his servant. But he says, I'm not worthy for you to come into my house, but I know that if you just speak the words, it'll happen. And this very concept must have been on the centurion's mind when he wrote that. And if Jesus has this supernatural power to heal, then he doesn't need to be there to wave his hands over the sick. Meanwhile, that event is contradicted by the time where a woman was healed by touching the hem of Jesus' garment without him knowing about it. But it seems that in both these instances, the common effective thread was their faith in the efficacy of the act rather than how it was done. And if Jesus has a magic system, then it's only about the faith of the affected. So
if Wolfe truly is a hardcore Catholic, whether or not he agrees with that might be a question of some orthodoxy problems. but I mean, faith versus works, and how much of it is the magic of saying the words in Latin in the right order for it to be the thing. But anyway, that's totally different.
Yeah, I don't know. Why do you always do these things, Craig? So Dorcas says, you never asked me what I saw today.
And he says, I realized that I'd been trying to steer the conversation away from it. I had a premonition, as he does, that it would be something quite meaningless to me, to which Dorcas would attach great meaning, as madmen do who believe the tracks of worms beneath the bark of fallen trees to be a supernatural script.
Severian thinks she's crazy. Basically.
Yeah, he pretty much flat out says that here. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, she's talking about coughing up bullets. She's losing it, man. He didn't look for the bullets because he didn't want to deal with her when they weren't in the drawer. And he says, I thought it might be better to keep your mind off of it, whatever it was.
And she says, no doubt it would, if only we could. It was a chair.
It was a very specific chair that she saw in the market.
Yeah. And so this chair actually seems to have affected her even more than the lead. The lead sort of confirmed something, but the chair is what actually keyed her into it. So she says it was an old chair and a table and several other things. It seems that there's a shop in the Turner's Street that sells old furniture to the eclectics and to those among the autochthons who've absorbed enough of our culture to want it. There's no source here to supply the demand, and so 2 or 3 times a year, the owner and his sons go to Nessus, to the abandoned quarters of the South, and fill their boat. I talked to him, you see. I know all about it. There are tens of thousands of empty houses there. Some have fallen in long ago, but some are still standing as their owners left them. Most have been looted, yet they still find silver and bits of jewelry now and then. And though most have lost most of their furniture, the owners who moved almost always left some things behind. In some of those houses, all the furnishings are still there. Those are the best, he said. He thinks that a few families, or perhaps only a few people living alone, remained behind when the quarter died. They were too old to move, or too stubborn. I've thought about it, and I'm sure some of them must have had something there they could not bear to leave. A grave, perhaps. They boarded their windows against the marauders, and they kept dogs and worse things to protect them. Eventually they left, or they came to the end of life, and their animals devoured their bodies and broke free. But by that time, there was no one there, not even looters or scavengers, not until this man and his sons.
And so Severian says, there must be a lot of chairs.
Yeah, I think because he's keyed in, he's like, she thinks she recognizes this one. She's
Right,
like, not like that one. I knew everything about it. The carving on the legs and even the pattern in the grain of the arms. So much came back then.
And what happened when she had this realization, Greg?
And then here, when I vomited those pieces of lead, things like hard, heavy seeds, then I knew.
It's all coming back, so to speak. Yeah.
Do you remember, Severian, how it was when we left the Botanic Garden? You, Aggie, and I came out of that great glass vivarium, and you hired a boat to take us from the island to the shore. And the river was full of nenuphars with blue flowers and shining green leaves. Their seeds are like that, hard and heavy and dark. And I've heard that they sink to the bottom of Guile and remain there for whole ages of the world. But when chance brings them near the surface, they sprout, no matter how old they may be, so that the flowers of a Chiliad past are seen to bloom again. What is the power that calls them back? Can you explain it?
Severian says, sunshine, I suppose. But no, I cannot explain it.
And is there no source of sunlight except the sun?
So, so Severian writes, I knew then what it was she meant, though something in me could not accept it. Severian is thinking the light of the claw.
Mm-hmm. When that man, Hildegard, the man we met a second time on top of the tomb in the ruined stone town, was ferrying us across the Lake of Birds, he talked of millions of dead people, people whose bodies had been sunk in that water. How were they made to sink, Severian? Bodies float. How do they weight them? I don't know. Do you?
Severian writes, and he tells her they force lead shots down the throats. Yeah, and by the way, Severian was told this detail by his presumed grandfather, Dorcas' husband. The old man says, one morning I came looking for Cass, like I always do, unless I've something else I have to take care of. And there were two curators on the shore with a harpoon, dead manatee in the lake, they said. I went out with my hook and got it, and it wasn't no manatee, but a man. He spit up his lead, or they hadn't put enough in. Looked as good as you or her, and better than me. It's very nasty. Had he been dead long?
And he says, there's no way of telling, for the water here pickles them. You'll hear it said it turns their skin to leather, and so it does.
So Severian says they weight the dead with lead shots stuffed down their throat. And Dorcas says, I thought so. No, I knew so. I knew it as soon as I saw them. And she figures the claw brought her back, and well, she might. It's all set up. The claw is in Severian's sabertash. Severian falls in the water just over her body. And by the same token, Severian is healed from his wound by the Avern leaf. But this is some, brutal misdirection, because at the end of the volume, Severian is going to be told by the Hierogyles that the claw just does not have the power to resurrect anyone. But as I've said before, there's more misdirection going on here. Dorcas's body has been missing for 40 years. She's his grandmother, and Severian wanders into the Garden of Endless Sleep and just happens to trip into the water right over the body of his own grandmother. In my opinion, Craig, my experience with Wolfe's stories is that he is not a big fan of coincidences. Many people think he is. But right now, for a first-time reader, they're thinking, big revelation. The Claw resurrected a random body in the Garden of Endless Sleep. Dude, that's random. Now, Severian discusses the idiosyncratic nature of the Claw, and it is now grappling that it does not have the particular rules system that he's been imagining.
Yep. He says, it has acted sometimes, I'll admit that, but only when I took it out, and not always then. When you pulled me out of the water in the Garden of Endless Sleep, it was in my sabertash, and I didn't even know I had it.
And Dorcas asks if she can see that claw again. This is kind of a repeat of the night when he first pulled out the claw and saw the vision of the burning cathedral. And Severian feels like they only saw it because he pulled it out, and in truth, they only saw it because he had it to pull it out. And in a way, regardless of what the Hirad jewels say, in a way, Dorcas was a miracle revealed by the claw as well, even more than the cathedral. So Severian says, I pulled it from its soft pouch. He doesn't say what the pouch was made of.
Yeah. So he says, the blue fires seemed sleepy, but I could see the cruel-looking hook at the center of the gem that had given it its name. Dorcas extended her hand, but I shook my head, remembering the wine glass.
The claw is a symbol of the conciliator, and the cross is a symbol of Christ, and both are images of cruelty. And now Severian feels like Dorcas will do something to it like she did with the wine glass. But Dorcas says she would never do that because it would be sacrilege.
Yeah, and that's a really good point there. That, I mean, everything we talked about with, like, you know, how the resurrection means there must be, you know, there's got to be something bad. You have to have had death to have resurrection again. The same kind of thing is here. Like, we've got the claw, which is the symbol of cruelty, and Severian specifically mentions that, just like, yeah, the symbol of Christianity is a torture device, right? I mean, it's kind of important why Severian is a torture. We'll get in more of that, but no, he even specifically says, as he brings the claw out, you know, he emphasizes you could see that horrible hook claw, that cruel looking hook in the center.
Right.
So
Exactly.
this is a hard thing. But he says, if you believe what you say, and I think you do, then you must hate it for drawing you back.
Well, yeah, Dorcas says, from death. She lays back, staring at the ceiling like she's dead in a coffin again, smiling. Smiling is always an image of death. But Severian says that she's smiling as if she shared some deep and ludicrous secret with the ceiling. Anyway, she says, from death. Go ahead and say it. It won't hurt you.
But Severian responds, from sleep. Since if one can be recalled from it, it is not death. Not death as we have always understood it, the death that is in our minds when we say death. Although I have to confess it is still almost impossible for me to believe that the conciliator, dead now for so many thousands of years, should act through this stone to raise others.
Again, Craig, we're dealing with images of reality versus the actual reality. In this case, instead of Severian interacting with a false image of Thecla, described by the false Thecla, or other images or other people reacting to their false image of Severian, now we're talking about how we are reacting to the false image of death itself. You know, maybe you remember in the first chapter of Shadow in our discussion, I said that I was coming to believe that an important theme of the Book of the New Sun was about the nature of symbols themselves, as symbols, as images, or signifiers of the real thing. In the Claw of the Conciliator, Marin and the Kameian deal with this same tension. Marin says there is no magic, there's only knowledge more or less hidden, and that is the concept of magic is a mistake. It's a misunderstanding of something else entirely. And the Kameian offers a subtle correction. She says, words are symbols. Marin chooses to delimit magic to that which does not exist, and so it does not exist. If you choose to call what we are about to do here magic, the magic lives while we do it. So Marin has semantically erased magic, but that does not mean there is no magic, as those who use the term understand it. By the same token, The claw of the conciliator handed to his followers was a thorn, but then the followers turned the thorn into a jewel, which is what it became for them. But it was no less holy or mundane. Now we come to the image of death. But Severian says that death is not the image we think it is. It's only sleep.
Yeah, I like this because it's connected to the thing about, like you said, about that they start with, we're only talking to the image that we have, the person we think we are here. And what I kind of want to ultimately suggest is that, not to be mean, but it's Dorcas maybe who has the wrong perspective. And that even though she's suffering here, even though what she's truly experiencing is hard, that she's been ripped away from her family, from her life as she had it. But I think part of the story here, or at least what I take Wolfe to be hoping to sort of write in this, is that ultimately I think when Severian's right about that, when he's like, no, it's that what we think about as death is not really death if we can overcome it. And there's maybe something in here that he's suggesting that Dorcas is a tragic figure. Tragic not because she's willfully wrong, but tragic because she ultimately, in realizing what she's gone through, she identifies too much with, in some ways, the wrong things. That identifying the only goodness and the only life as the life that she had with her family originally, that there is something limited in that. And that's sort of her tragedy, is that she can't get beyond that and move on with a new life. I think there are a lot of people who might not like that, like who might be like, well, no, but that's a hard thing. But because she can't give it up, because she can't sort of accept that things have passed, but that there's a new life and a different thing that could come, that in some ways her perspective is limited. And I think too, there's something in Severian here, even though it's fun to talk about how Severian is dense and doesn't get it. The fact that he keeps coming back to the idea that, yes, what I do is death, but it's not just death, that there are other aspects, there are other ways to look at it. There's something that Wolfe, I think, is saying, is that there is something true in that it might, yes, Severian could be kind of bullheaded here and missing the point and being crude about how he's doing it, but at the same time, he's not totally wrong. And that all of this is kind of saying there is a way for Severian's points to be made, and for Dorcas's perspective here to be tragic, like tragic in the sense of she could have done something else. Because what does she do? Unfortunately, what she does is go back and she dwells in the past, and she doesn't move on. And that's tragic, in the end. And even though Severian is way too brusque here in saying you should just get over it, it's obviously death isn't that bad, and it's sleep, and you should see how other men look at you and whatnot. Yeah, it's too easy the way he says it, but at the same time, there is something there that is life affirming in what he's saying, and that you do still have another chance, that there are other men there, you can move on, and that this is in some ways a gift, that she's refusing to see the gift, even as it comes. And so I think there's a big, I have to admit, even myself, like I like Dorcas so much and I see her suffering so much that you don't want to see her being sort of used to make a kind of moral point like that. But I do think in the end, that's what Wolfe's trying to do with this little interlude here, is to point out that as hard as it is for her to accept, and maybe it's a big ask to accept for anybody, but there is ultimately a way that Dorcas might be wrong, that she can't see enough, and that is the tragedy. And maybe that's just a human tragedy, that because of our own perspectives, we do see things too much from our own perspectives, and it limits us and keeps us from doing things. But for all of his sort of seemingly unfeeling ways of going about it, I think that's Wolfe probably sides ultimately a lot more with Severian and what he's saying here than he would with Dorcas's perspective.
Oh yeah. I think I 100% agree that Wolfe's own prejudices and biases are with Severian at this point. He is biased toward the resurrected earth. He is biased. He himself has said that he said that he believed in the persistence of the human soul, which is to say after death. And but I think by putting this perspective in Dorcas, who we have come to accept as the truth speaker, while everyone else is unreliable, she is the one who sees things as they truly are, and that we've come to trust her. And now Wolfe is putting the perspective of resurrection, of the dark side of resurrection, that it involves death and hardship and loss, that into Dorcas's mouth. He's giving it its due. He's giving, just as he gives due to the gibbers when they mutiny, because they know that Severian is, to them, he's the guy who's going to destroy the world.
Yeah. And I think there is a good way to look at that, which is that he's not doing it cruelly in order to dismiss what Dorcas is going through. On the contrary, he's sort of doing it to say, and this is how serious that loss has to be.
Yeah.
That, it might be almost too much to accept. That it would have to be as hard as it seems like it is for Dorcas to accept. That only then, when you see what's really, really, really at risk here, can you see how much has to really be lost if you are going to have death just be sleep. You have to be willing to basically you give up your life for a new life. That it's a huge, true sacrifice that has to be made. And maybe part of the thing here is that Dorcas, for all of her other goodness and ability to see things, in the end, she's not willing to sacrifice what she had. And that's how hard of a sacrifice it really has to be to make it. So anyway, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people, I mean, I actually read this from time to time, of people making light of Christ's crucifixion, because after all, he knows he's going to come back. So, it kind of guts the because he knows he's going to be coming back in 3 days. It takes all of the drama out of the death. But there's, he knows he's going to be tortured to death, and there's that moment in the Garden of Gethsemane where he's sweating drops of blood, and he's begging for this to pass by him, that he doesn't have to do this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think too, there's something that's very Kierkegaard like about this, where Kierkegaard is going to talk about, religion is a paradox and a contradiction, but in order for you to really see that contradiction, it has to be an extreme contradiction. So it's kind of like Kierkegaard would stress that, if you want to see really how ultimately paradoxical the Christian story is, you have to believe ultimately that, Jesus's fear was not just sort of, momentary. It wasn't just like, oh, this may be scary. Like for Kierkegaard, when Jesus has the moment of doubt, he has true doubt, to the point of, no, I don't think there's a guarantee. I might be wrong. Like it's only really worthwhile doubt. It's only a true faith in the face of that ultimate doubt in the end. Yeah, it's got to be a serious sacrifice if it's going to be a sort of true leap of faith that comes with it. And so I think in some ways, I like sort of reading this part of Kierkegaard, because if you read Fear and Trembling, and sort of the story about how he talks about, how the command for Abraham to kill Isaac, how rash, how
if you want to see what faith requires, it really does take this utterly irrational faith where you have to be willing to do the most horrible thing for no good reason. That's really the cost of it. And to sort of get the beauty of it, you have to undergo the horribleness of it. I feel like there's a lot about that kind of sort of super extreme thinking that's going on in these passages here. So yeah.
So Thecla is a Kierkegaardian.
Dorcas. I think Dorcas is in some
or
ways
Thecla. There's no. Every religion needs a paradox.
Oh yeah. That is true. She says it almost sort of dismissively. Kierkegaard is more about like, no, that's the only way it's meaningful. It's
right.
Like,
yeah.
If it is, yeah. So if it is just sort of like a, he'd be like, yeah, if you just think that, Jesus having doubt was just sort of a token thing, just to sort of say, yeah, then you don't really get what was going on. You don't really understand the true depth of the paradox of Christianity. Like that's a very Kierkegaardian kind of take.
Right.
And that's, I feel like Wolfe is brushing up against a story like that here in certain ways with Dorcas. So I think we are totally supposed to sympathize with Dorcas 100% and recognize that she's probably still missing something because what he's doing is pointing out here that resurrection would require ultimate cost, like it does have to come in the face of ultimate loss, and so much that it might be too much for people to truly accept. So
Wolfe is building up the stakes here so that Severian can knock him down. It has to be a hard choice or it's not an interesting choice.
Yeah. And it's not fair. And he's kind of pointing out, it is not fair. It might even seem totally unjust, but
and illogical and irrational and pointless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, to all this, Dorcas doesn't say anything, and Severian is not sure she's even listening. Again, it's as if he's speaking to her corpse.
You mentioned Hildegren and the time he rowed us across the lake in his boat to pick the Avern. Do you remember what he said of death? It was that she was a good friend to the birds. Perhaps we ought to have known then that such a death could not be death as we imagine it.
Maybe Severian does not believe what she's saying, or he's trying to talk her down with the only language that he thinks she will listen to. But ultimately, once again, Severian is mansplaining and missing what's important to Dorcas. She says, if I say I believe all that, will you let me hold the claw? And Severian, who does not trust her in this state, just shakes his head no. And Severian makes an interesting observation here. He says, Dorcas was not looking at me, but she must have seen the motion of my shadow, or perhaps it was only her mental Severian on the ceiling that shook its head as well. And it turns out that he was, in fact, reading her correctly.
Yeah. You are right, then. I was going to destroy it if I could. Shall I tell you what I really believe? I believe I have been dead, not sleeping, but dead. That all my life took place a long, long time ago when I lived with my husband above a little shop and took care of our child. That this conciliator of yours who came so long ago was an adventurer from one of the ancient races who outlived the universal death.
Regarding unreliability, in a lesser novel, this would be the explanation. But I don't think it is correct about the conciliator. I don't think Severian is part of any lost ancient race. However, I'm thinking of old B-sharp flat from the Earth list and maybe others who would find this idea very appealing. But Severian might have been adopted into that race, right? Everything else here is probably true, and that's the hard thing about Wolfe's unreliability. Often someone partly true, sometimes they are only true in a sense, but her summary of her former life suggests that Dorcas did not die, I think, in childbirth, or maybe she did die in Owen was born and he was old enough to remember her, and alternatively, if Owen had a twin, say a twin sister, perhaps she died in childbirth, or maybe she died in childbirth and that child died, or maybe that child is Casdo. She seems too young for that. Even for Wolfe, I would like to see some evidence from Dorcas that she feels like she just gave birth. So I know you didn't bring that up, but I'm dispensing with it here.
Yeah.
I don't think she died in childbirth.
Yeah, fair enough. And that the specific details about there are, yeah, I agree. They don't totally line up, but yeah. So, but so he goes on, or she goes on, I should say. Dorcas says, I ask you, Severian, when the conciliator comes again, isn't he to be called the new son? Doesn't that sound like it? And I believe that when he came, he brought with him something that had the same power over time that Father Aneri's mirrors are said to have over distance. It's that gem of yours.
She stopped and turned her head and looked at Severian defiantly. Mic dropped.
Yeah. And so this is maybe kind of the clue here that, you know, she's maybe in some sense right, but she's also sort of, maybe she is missing something. Like she's true, but she's missing some deeper truths maybe too at the same time. So yeah. She continues. She says, Severian, when you brought the Ulan back to life, it was because the claw twisted time for him to the point at which he still lived. When you half healed your friend's wounds, it was because it bent the moment to one when they would be nearly healed. And when you fell into the fen in the Garden of Endless Sleep, it must have touched me, or nearly touched me. And for me, it became the time in which I had lived, so that I lived again. But I have been dead. For a long, long time I was dead, a shrunken corpse preserved in the brown water, and there is something in me that is dead still.
Ouch. And this reminds me of the famous Faulkner line from Requiem for a Nun. The past is never dead. It's not even past. All of us labor in webs spun long before we were born, webs of heredity and environment, of desire and consequence, of history and eternity. So, Severian encounters. There is something in all of us that has always been dead, if only because we know that eventually we will die. All of us, except the smallest children. This calls back to Severian's thoughts when he encounters Alton, and I feel like I understand it, but that's not relevant here. I think anyway. The thing is that Severian wrote, Alton said, "Whose apprentice are you?" And again, I seem to hear bronze, and quite suddenly I felt that he and I were dead, and that the darkness surrounding us was grave soil pressing in about our eyes, grave soil through which the bell called us to worship at whatever shrines may exist below ground. The livid woman I had seen dragged from her grave rose before me so vividly that I seemed to see her face in the almost luminous whiteness of the figure who spoke. So, yeah. So anyway, it turns out that Dorcas has been setting the table to break up with Severian. She says, I have to go back and find out who I was and where I lived and what happened to me. I know you can't go with me. And as Severian does in these circumstances, he nods. And she's not even looking at him, hopefully. She's not waiting for an okay or a grunt or something.
Yeah, and it turns out she doesn't even want Severian to go. And I'm not asking you to go. I don't even want you to. I love you, but you are another death, a death that has stayed with me and befriended me as the old death in the lake did, but death all the same. I don't want to take death with me when I go to look for my life.
Ooh, well, this is a sudden reversal from their conversation at House Absolute, right? Severian will get around to that in a bit, but he says he does get it.
Well, and I think that line there when she says, I don't want to take death with me when I go back to look for my life, that I think is what Dorcas does wrong. That she's ultimately just not willing to accept death, especially not her own. And I think that's that's the source of her tragedy. And if there's sort of kind of an allegorical point here to Dorcas, that's why she's tragic, is because she won't accept her own death in the end.
She won't. Well, she can't accept a new resurrected life because she has to go back to the life that she left behind before
and
death.
that's understandable, but at the same time, it's kind of like she refuses to mourn herself and to mourn what she's lost. And that's what makes her, I think, in this story, a sort of tragic figure, is that and it sounds callous maybe for us to say, like, yeah, she won't just move on. And it's like, yeah, that's, I mean, yeah, but what she won't do is accept that the past is the past. And because she's sort of in many ways been unfairly, yanked back, without her consent, of course. Yeah.
And robbed of the past too, right?
Yeah,
she can't, totally. It's hard to say goodbye. She can't even remember it.
Yep. And so, yes, that's horrible, but that's also maybe ultimately why she's stuck. And so maybe that's part of the point too, about like, if it was a sort of mechanical thing that resurrected her and sort of just randomly sort of yanked her out of death back into life. Yeah, that's not what the new sun is supposed to be. Like, it's not supposed to be that kind of sort of just random willy-nilly thing. And if that's all that was going on, then yeah, she's right not to like that, and to sort of talk about it as your conciliator, as she says. But there is a bigger story too that all of this stuff seems to be moving towards, and that's what she can't get. So it's complicated. Like, it's a weird story. I don't think that in the end Wolfe is saying one person is right and one person is wrong, and this is not, like, these are humans, so there's going to be good things and bad things in everything that they do. But I think that thing there, when she says, I won't take death back with me to look for life, that's kind of like saying, just to put it in sort of the terms that we've been given here, it's almost like saying, well, I want Christianity, but I want it without the suffering, or I want resurrection, but I don't want to have the death.
I want to go to heaven, but I don't want to die.
But or I want to go to heaven, but I don't want to have to live first. something. And he's kind of like, it doesn't, like, the whole point is that it's this drama that is going through. And that's kind of where I think ultimately that's where evolution, like what Wolfe's trying to do, and maybe in the long run here, is mix some kind of evolution that's all about death and rebirth to the sort of religious meaning. That you got to have you have to have the death in order to have the rebirth, right? That's why the first chapter is called Resurrection and Death. So that it is both. So the fact that she won't do it, that's sort of her tragedy here, and why she ends up being stuck in the past. So, and he kudos to Wolfe. He makes it totally understandable how hard it is to give that up, because everything about Dorcas, otherwise, it does seem totally reasonable. She's like, I've been screwed and I want to go find what I've been left. Right. Yeah. She has. So, she says, my child may still be alive, an old man perhaps, but still alive. I have to know.
And now, for the first time, or even the second time, the reader might not know. They might not know it, but we do. Her child is about 40 years old and was working at the Inn of Lost Loves. And this came up in a discussion recently. There is a room of lost loves in Gene Wolfe's novel, The Wizard Knight. And just as here, Abel goes there to re-encounter his dead mother. And by that same token, Owen re-encounters his dead mother at the Inn of Lost Loves. And so now Severian reminds her that she once told him that he was not death, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It says, you have been death to me. I have succumbed to the trap I warned you of, if you like. Perhaps you are not death, but you will remain what you are, a torturer and a carnifex, and your hands will run with blood. Since you remember that time at the House Absolute so well, perhaps I can't say it, the conciliator or the claw or the increate has done this to me, not you.
There's some irony, right? Yeah. And also, one sense, she doesn't know that Severian is leaving his job as the chief torturer in Thrax, but he is not going to leave his job as a torturer. Ultimately, he's going to put the old Earth to death to bring life to the new one.
Yeah.
So what was she get? She says, since you remember that time at House Absolute so well, perhaps I can't say it, What was she going to say? Since you remember that time at the House Absolute so well, perhaps you, what?
I think what she was, if I'm right, I think what she was going to try to say was, actually, I'm not exactly sure. I need to think about that part. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe saying, hey, maybe she's saying that Severian owes her. Maybe he should give her money to return south. That's apparently what she is driving toward.
It could be that. Yeah. I mean, because she seems to want to deflect away from Severian, because she goes on to talk about the conciliator and the claw, and the increate himself,
Yeah, I think that must be. In fact, I think that must be what he said. She was going to say, perhaps you could help. You could loan me some money so I can go south. Since you remember that time at the House of Absolute. No, you don't owe me. The conciliator or the claw or the increate, they're the one that did this, not me. It's not like you owe me anything. I think that's what she was driving at, because she talks about, and because she does. Severian says, what is it? Go ahead and tell me. And then she talks about the money that they got from Talos at House Absolute. She says, I gave everything to you. Can I have it back? I need it. If not all of it, at least some of it. And Severian just empties every auric chalk that he has in his sabretache on the little table. He says it was as much as she had given him and maybe a little more. And Dorcas thanks him and says, you're not going to need it? And Severian points out that she's going to need the money more. And theoretically, he could earn a living along the way. He also points out that the money is hers, which is absolutely 100% true.
So she says, I'm going to leave tomorrow if I feel strong enough. The day after tomorrow, whether I feel strong or not. I don't suppose you know how often the boats put out going downriver.
Severian just says that when you want a boat to go south around here, you just need to get in and shove off. And you know what, Craig? This is a good place for us to shove off. And because we're not even close to being done. And
we're mixing up 3 chapters here. They're short on their own, but together there's a lot.
Yeah, I don't know where to cut them, but this is going to be as good as we can do. So yeah, let's wrap this up. We can finish this next time. So we must have screwed up somewhere, right? Of course, in the amount of time that we're talking. So somebody out there has some corrections or some complaints for us that may have some laudatory compliments. For all I know, you know where to bring them to. You know where to find us. We're not that hard, and so bring them on, and go ahead and leave a recommendation on Apple Podcasts or on Stitcher or on any other place that you make recommendations for podcasts. And but most of all, be sure and tell your Wolf reading friends. And so until you see us sailing down south out of Frax, that's through the rapids, may the mortar favor you.
Yes, and may you keep down all that you swallow.
Yeah, keep it down.
They walked along by the old canal, so confused I remember well, stuffed into a strange hotel with the neon burning bright. He felt the heat of the night, it hit him like a freight train moving with a simple twist of fate. See her anywhere. He told himself and he didn't care. Pushed the window open wide. Felt an emptiness inside, to which he just could not relate. Brought on by a simple twist of fate. my twin, but I lost the way. She was born in spring, but I was born too late. Blame it on a simple twist of fate.
Alton said, "Whose apprentice are you?"
Oh yeah,
and
when
I
he encounters Alton. You said
Yeah.
Ulan.
Oh, did I say Ulan? Oh, okay. Let me try it again. Okay, let's go. Okay,
or we could get up to Hathor, or we could just do a little bit more and then stop at Hathor.
Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. We get to the conversation about Hathor. I have a whole lot to say. Okay, so he says, it says you're going to need the money. And wait, it turns out Dorcas been studying the table. Blah, 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 blah. So they've been sitting. I don't know why, but you probably got to cut that out. Let's try again. Let's forget about that.
Let's see.
But it also try again. Okay, I need some help with this. Okay, never mind. I don't need help. I got this. I think this is Farrar. Let me look.
Oh, I feel like that's right from what I remember looking at.
Yeah, but I don't want to. Don't let me work off memory. That's always a bad thing.